Morning. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Amanda Odell, and I'm the Director of Investor Experience for the Knoxville Chamber. We're so excited to be hosting the Grow Together panel this morning. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our small business and entrepreneurship ecosystem sponsor, Computer Systems Plus, and our program sponsor, TVA Employees Credit Union. We're so grateful for their investment in driving regional economic prosperity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Claudia Caballero. Claudia is President and CEO of Centro Hispano, a nonprofit that works to empower the Latino community through education, workforce development, youth and family engagement, and resource referral services. She's also on the Chamber's Board of Directors. Claudia, we're so appreciative of everything you're doing to better our community, and thank you so much for being here today. I'll turn the program over to you now.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Kristen. Bienvenidos. Buenos días. My name is Claudia Caballero, as we've said, and I'm the CEO at Centro Hispano. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, everyone. I'm very excited today to meet with some of our panel members, allies, people we work with every day at Centro Hispano. And before we get started, one of the questions that they will be answering as they introduce themselves is what makes them passionate about this work. And some of you may know me. I unfortunately can't see who's on the call, and I always love saying hi and shout outs to people. So if I know you and I can't see you, you can leave a little note in the chat, and I'd love to see who's on today and where you're calling from or where you're joining in from. This work, business is something I'm very passionate about. My background is business. My undergrad is in business, and my MBA will be in business if I survive and I finish, which I will in 2023. So what makes me passionate about this is as a young adult, actually in my early teens, my family, I'm one of 5. And in Honduras, my family was struggling to be able to make money to get us through college. So my mom decided to start a small business. And she decided she was going to hire, without paying, her 3 eldest daughters to be waitresses and help in the kitchen. And so the first 10 years of my professional life were working in a family restaurant. And I was able to see how small business took us out of some really dire economic situations. So I love the opportunity of working in small businesses, supporting small businesses, helping people end generational poverty and start building generational wealth, which is the American dream for so many immigrants. So I'm so happy to be here today, working with the Chamber, working with this team to develop strategies to help small Latino businesses grow and be successful and contribute to the greater economic goals of our region, because we are part of this fabric in this community, and we're happy to be here. So without more, I would love to introduce my fellow team today, my panelists. I'm going to start with Ruben Moreno on our call. And if you could jump in, Ruben, tell us about you.
Sure. Thank you, Claudia. I'm going to use Claudia's accent. So my name is Ruben Moreno. And I've actually been in Knoxville now for about 18 years. And my background, very quickly, I spent the first 15 years of my professional career in corporate human resources. And I've now spent the last 16 years in executive search, servicing clients that helping them find HR talent across the country. 6 years ago, co-founded Blue Rock Search. Blue Rock Search is an executive recruiting firm. Many firms have this similar structure. We have multiple practices. By default, I run our human resources practice. And just to give you a perspective in terms of us, very proud, but what I would say is I'm still a rookie small business owner, 6 years into this. But we've been very blessed and very fortunate. We started 6 years ago, 3 partners and an admin in a 500 square foot shared office space. We now have offices in Ohio, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Philadelphia, and we have 17 employees. So we've, definitely, as we've seen kind of the economic trends, and in particular for us in human resources is almost 80% of our business across the country. We work with clients across multiple industries. We have actually seen an uptick in demand for human resources professionals. The pandemic has actually put HR on the front and center of a lot of issues. So as I share with a lot of my HR executives, the good news is you're in HR. The bad news is you're in HR. So with that said, for me, from a personal passion space, being a small business owner of an executive recruiting firm, part of my role and my job, I actually kind of see it as ministry. Our why when we started this 6 years ago was changing lives and organizations one relationship at a time. And so we're in a unique space where we get to impact, passion space is, diversity in the slates and the people that we interact with, and then we place. And then for me, as a small business owner, it's really helping obviously Blue Rock, but other minority-owned businesses gain access to larger scale business opportunities that we don't necessarily have access to the same traditional networks that would give you that access. And I think the other piece is, in terms of showing up and influencing behavior, big believer, data is king, is using empirical data. And Ace, I think you're going to talk about that, is what do the numbers say and how do we use that to influence and drive behavior? Because what I have found, I'll just give one particular example, my last passion space. I've got a lot of them, Claudia. But it's, we're doing a lot of work right now in partnership with some other organizations. Great example is increasing board level representation from a Latino population. Probably the most blatant example of underrepresentation right now in this space. State of California, 22% Latinx population, 2% board level representation. And if you look at the large tech companies that everyone speaks about, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, they call them the FANG companies, not a single Latino on any one of those boards, right? So definitely just increasing from that perspective. And I've talked too much. That's Ruben.
That's a Latino. I love it. Thank you, Ruben. You bring so much experience. Really excited to chat with you about these perspectives from outside of our region, because we know that that also helps us grow. So I'm really excited to have you with us today. Efrain, bienvenido. ¿Cómo estás? Tell us who you are, where you work, and why you're passionate about Latino business community.
Well, first of all, can you hear me there?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, we've had some technical difficulties trying to get logged in, but I'm Efrain Rodriguez. I've been in this community for about 9 years now. I moved here, I guess right the day, if you guys know about the Mayan calendar, right the day that the world was supposed to end, I was coming into the United States, and I've been welcomed by a lot of people. Originally worked for Centro Hispano, where Claudia is now. I started as a program coordinator. Well, I started as a volunteer. Later on as a program coordinator, been working a lot with the community since then. I know Brandon, from Centro as well. Not a lot of people in the community. Currently working for Express Employment Professionals. I don't know if anybody is familiar with it, but similar to Ruben, it's also kind of like an HR kind of, solutions for different companies, working with tons of global, both global and local companies, to help provide, I guess, workforce for them so that they can meet their, I guess, production needs and whatnot. But I'm very passionate about helping people. I've been doing it for quite a bit, since I was at Centro, being able to help, people provide for their families, being in a safe space, and just in general, being able, to help provide, again, for their families. So very happy to be here. Very happy to share, information with everybody, and anything that we can do to help, we'll be trying to do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's see. Brandon Ledford, can you tell us who you are, what you do?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Ledford. I'm the Director of Workforce Development for Centro Hispano. I am a Knoxville native, born and raised. I attended the University of Tennessee, where I studied Hispanic Studies and International Business, and that's how I found Centro. So in August of 2015, I came on as a volunteer, and much like Efrain, I later came on staff whenever I decided to join Claudia on her journey as becoming president and CEO and growing the organization into what it is now. I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about in general with the work that we do is creating space for people and making connections. So for me, creating space means creating space where people feel safe, they're able to be vulnerable, and also creating space in spaces where people don't always see themselves and helping make those connections to where they have access to resources and where we're able to be the best and thrive in the environments that we're in every day.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And Ace.
Hi,
Beorchia.
good morning, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Ace Beorchia, and I am a doctoral student here at the University of Tennessee. And over the past 5 years or so, I've been studying Latino entrepreneurship, especially in areas such as Knoxville. And what makes me passionate, what I'm most passionate about, I would say, is really connecting these two worlds of academia and the community that I reside in. I think a lot of times there's a disconnect from what's going on within the ivory tower. And I hope to really break down that barrier and contribute back to the community. Just because I do, my profession is to study and learn. And what a waste if you're not giving that back to the people who really could benefit by that information. So yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to learn from all of you and hopefully share a little bit of what I've learned over the past couple of years.
Thank you so much. So I'm really excited about the panelists. I will not go without saying that we did have women presenting and we had them have to drop off last minute because I'm usually all about women power on presentations. So I'm going to take one for the team here. And we are going to talk beginning here with research because as we know, and Ruben talked about it earlier, the importance of knowing the numbers and why that matters. And so really excited to talk a little bit. Ace, you've done extensive research on Latino entrepreneurship across the country and really valuable research locally. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Latino culture, both nationally and locally in terms of small business and what findings you've had with the research here locally?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and we could probably have an entire conversation about this. But I'll try to keep it brief, and maybe start at the high level, like you said, at the national level, and work my way down, and hopefully get to why this matters. So I think the biggest story that we can really talk about is that the future of the United States economy is really dependent on Latino business owners. Latinos right now in the U.S. compose just under 20% of the population, and by 2050, so within 30 years, it'll be 30%. So almost 1 in 3 people in the United States will identify as Latino, and as such, they're going to be these big drivers for economic growth, and we're already seeing that. Currently, Latinos are overrepresented when it comes to new businesses and entrepreneurs, and they're outpacing all other racial and ethnic groups. So the future of the U.S. economy, the Latino population is going to be a huge part of that. So that's kind of the national story of what we see happening. But what's interesting is as we come down deeper and look at what's happening here regionally. So in the past, Latino immigrants have largely migrated to these areas we call established destinations. So these are areas in the Southwest, Southern California, and some larger metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, Miami, LA. But what we've been seeing in the last 30 years is that Latinos are now immigrating to places we call new destinations, places like Tennessee. These are areas where historically there hasn't been a high representation of Latinos in the geographic area, but recently there's been a very large and rapid influx of Latino community members, especially immigrants. And in fact, some of these states, these are states that all had over 200% growth in the Latino population just between 1990 and 2000. And it's only increased since then. North Carolina, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee in that time period had a 278% growth in the Latino population. South Carolina, Alabama. So we can talk more maybe in the Q&A about reasons why a new destination is happening if anyone is interested. But here in Knoxville, we're seeing this same trend. Knoxville is a new destination where we have an increasing Latino community. In 2010, Latinos composed 3.5% of the Knoxville population. And just recently, from the 2020 census, that's jumped up to nearly 30,000. In the year 2000, it was only 4.8 thousand. So in 20 years, Knoxville has jumped up from 4.8 thousand Latinos to nearly 30,000 Latinos. And this is only expected to continue to increase. So really, what does this mean? You asked kind of what this means for the business culture. I think we can look at this two ways. One is institutionally, when we talk about the organizations from an organizational standpoint, because we are a new destination, it means that historically we haven't had the institutions that have like a broad range of institutions to support this immigrant population, right? So we talk about resources, we talk about things like translation into Spanish for these new immigrants. And I'm sure you all will talk about this, but these are from my interviews with local entrepreneurs, Latinos, they are wanting to give back to the community. They're putting in the work, and they're really a huge asset here in Knoxville. So institutionally, what that means as a new destination is we haven't yet developed the rich institutions to support the community, but that is happening with the work that you're doing at Centro, at the city and county. So this is happening. And individually, kind of like you said, Claudia, a lot of these people who I've spoken with are really trying to achieve the American dream, create an economic foundation for their family, but also to give back to the community. And the more that we can do as organization leaders to support these entrepreneurs will not only help them, their community, but Knoxville succeed and be economically stable in the future.
Thank you so much, Ace. I think this is really important information. I ask this all the time in our community, our business community in Knoxville. You know, with the numbers Ace has given us, what percentage of your company is Latino? What percentage of your employees are Latino? And then, just as important, how many of your clients are Latino? In the minority groups in the United States, the Latino community has over $1.3 trillion in purchasing power. What percentage of that is going to your business, and how are you reaching out to those communities? These are real questions that we get asked at Centro Hispano a lot. That's a different panel. That's a different conversation, but definitely something to keep in mind as we continue to grow as a city, as a county, and as the Latino population continues to grow in this area. Thank you, Ace. Efrain, could you tell us a little bit? First of all, I have to acknowledge, and I said earlier, you know, my organization stands on the shoulders of Efrain and the teams before us. Our organization is about 16 years old. And Brandon and myself, we've been at Centro for about a little over 5 years now. And a lot of the work that was done, the groundwork was done before us, was with teams in which Efrain was. So I'm very grateful to his support today, but also to the support to the organization in the past. Can you tell us a little bit, Efrain, from your knowledge and from your time here in the community, what obstacles do Latino entrepreneurs and their businesses face in terms of growth here in this region?
Yeah, I believe a lot of the times when speaking with, you know, new business owners or, you know, just people wanting to I guess, jump in the entrepreneurship, it's kind of like Ace was saying. I feel like it was the lack of resources, you know, information. You know, obviously there's organizations already providing that to people, or some to a certain extent, some information, but you know, one of the biggest challenges was that there was enough people to provide information for the larger, you know, I guess the larger amount of people that we're seeing increasing over time. Now, particularly where I'm at, you know, it's, you know, in the workforce in the community, we're seeing a lot of, you know, people moving from California, people bringing new ideas, you know, people moving from other areas, like Ace again mentioned, you know, being a new destination. You know, it is helping, at least on the economic side for the companies that we see particularly here, is an increase in the diversity, increase in the amount of people that are, you know, wanting to pitch in and wanting to participate out of, other cultures, and, companies wanting to become more diverse, bringing, different type of talent, and to a certain extent, kind of like helping drive that, moving to these areas. But in general, I guess the challenge is like I said, like just the amount of information or the amount of support that is for businesses that are wanting to grow here, because there's a lot of the construction, there's a lot of the food industry, that usually you see first, before other types of businesses kind of start developing. So, the more information there is available for people, the better growth that you see over time.
Thank you, Efrain. I know he has his ear close to the ground in terms of Latino community here. And Ace, I know you have done some research as well. And briefly, can you tell us maybe the top 3? I know you're going to coincide a little bit with what Efrain said, but what are the top 3 struggles in the focus groups you've had and in the interviews that you've performed that you find our community talking about in terms of barriers?
Yeah, I would say the 3 would probably be like legal and regulatory barriers. So this idea of how to go about to do things correctly. It's complicated enough for those of us who are from the United States, but when it's a new culture, a new system, new language, that makes it even more difficult. Number 2 is language more broadly. So this idea of a lot of organizations not having Spanish material for our Spanish-speaking community members. And then number 3, I would say, is access to capital. One of the issues is that most Latino companies, small businesses and entrepreneurs, use their own financing, their own funding. So they save until they can launch their business. And so one of the issues is creating funding and financing where they can grow a lot faster. And that would definitely be, I would say those are the top 3.
Thank you so much. This is a great segue. So we talk about what barriers, what challenges exist in the community. We've looked at the larger, broader picture and the trends nationally. Brandon, could you tell us a little more about how Centro Hispano is addressing some of those challenges? And if you can talk a little bit about the partnerships that are happening in the community, in the region to help address that. I think, it's very important when we think of this work that we do think of partnerships, because that makes our efforts more effective. It makes the results stronger. So can you talk a little more, can you start us out with what Centro is doing right now?
Yeah, so Centro has been experiencing rapid growth within the past couple of years, and we've always seen in the tunnel where we have this need for support services for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And so out of that, with support from the Chamber, thanks so much for having this panel and for also supporting us on this endeavor that we're having, the Chamber, the city, the county, having these stakeholders come together and really want to address the issues and the barriers that are facing the Latino community, that's been really crucial in us developing this department. And so we're launching, and there will be an official launch a little later on this year, but we're launching our small business department, which will be called Grandes Sueños, Pequeñas Empresas. So big dreams, small businesses. And our tagline for that is going to be Hazlo Posible. So really giving the empowerment necessary to where the main goal for these products would be to help build capacity and sustainability within the Latino-owned businesses, and also helping entrepreneurs who are still in the conceptual phase of the development of their company move into the actual implementation and development. And so we also identified within the focus groups that we've conducted many of the same things that Ace has done with his research, both nationally and locally, but also adding different layers to those conversations as well. One of the things that we've encountered is, for example, family dynamics are largely influenced by culture. And so some of the culturally relevant workshops and things that we have been noticing are things that, how do we help with, conflict resolution and communication when it comes to partners and families? Because entrepreneurs, really, it is your business, but it's also your family relationship that's intertwined into that. And so really diving into those deeper levels of what we need to offer as support services to help these businesses grow and thrive. And then also, some of the work that Centro Hispano is working on doing is identifying the barriers at the state, the county, and the local level. So what are the actual, as Ace said, barriers when it comes to documentation, regulation, licensing, insurance, and how are we able to tear those barriers down with something as simple as how do we communicate this information in Spanish? How do we have step-by-step guides? How do we provide the information in a way that the community is able to take it and actually be able to use it in a way that they're able to find the resources necessary that many times often exist. It's just we haven't made those connections within the community to tap into those resources for the community.
Thank you so much, Brandon. So I think this starts tying the pieces together from a local level to a national level, and then really talking about what tools are being offered. And I think Brandon mentioned, but we're actually using research-based curricula, and it is the Co-Starters program in Spanish. And so that will be launching later this year. Brandon also has been working really hard. We have about 50 people and small business owners on a waiting list to begin this program. So a lot of interest from the Latino community in terms of building capacity for this, for the region. So really excited about that. Thank you, Brandon. I know he and his team have been working really hard on that. Ruben, I would love to jump in right now with some of the knowledge you have around trends that you're seeing in the non-Latino business. So now we're going to be connecting. We're talking about the Latino businesses. We're talking about the Latino community. Tell us more about how non-Latino businesses can reach, interact, work with the Latino small business community, and why it matters. So why would we want that?
Thank you, Claudia. And here's what I would say, in this topic, because I did give this, some thought. I think there are across the country, there are definitely, what we've seen, particularly in the last 18 to 24 months, there have been industries that have surged, and there have been other industries that have purged, right? Just because of what's happened. Ostensibly, a lot of things that kind of came to a screeching halt. For anyone who's in, sit down dining, 2020 was a really tough year. But, it's interesting, and I'll just use that as an example. Within the food service industry, anybody who had a drive-through last year and continuing this year has seen a huge surge, right? So I think, from a business perspective, so from an industry standpoint, seeing industries like quick service restaurants, like all things services industry, as well as facilities services. Some of my biggest clients are experiencing the most rapid growth. They probably one of the largest facility services companies in the country is ABM. They're about a $6 billion company with 140,000 employees. And right now, their biggest impediment is staffing, right? They can't keep up. And Efrain, I'm sure you're seeing this quite a bit. I think there's a great opportunity. And again, I service a very small segment, HR executives and so forth. But I think the access to highly capable talent that is both, because I think, what I'm seeing now, it's not just about being bilingual. And for the many different Latinos on this call today, I see 3 different countries represented just on my panel. It's also about being bicultural, right? And understanding those nuances. And in the services business, my mom, used to tell me, right, son, you ever want to get to know somebody, break bread with them, right? You want to have an instant bond with a Latino, speaking our native tongue, and you just won half the battle, right? So I think from anybody who is in the services business or has an acute need for people to staff up, that's what we're seeing. The Latino community now, all of a sudden, in general across the U.S., all things minority owned are front and center, and many Fortune 1000 companies are flocking to that. In fact, we're in the process. It's been a laborious process. Ace and Brandon, I can tell you, I've been working for 6 months on getting our MBE certification, and the number of hurdles that you have to go through. And I have a team that's working with me on this. So it's this whole thing around access to people who can. The MBE certification gains you access to a whole level. Well, it's taken us 6+ months to get that. Well, it's also a 1 year of missed business opportunity from a 2021 perspective, because my business won't see that till next year. Right. So
before you keep going, Ruben, can you explain what those acronyms mean? Sorry.
I'm sorry. So MBE is you're certified as a minority business enterprise. And as a minority business enterprise, you actually get, it's quote unquote called a badge, but you can certify yourself. You put it on all of your social, you put it on your business cards and so forth. And across the country, in many cases, particularly on the government side, but also from a Fortune 1000 perspective, there are large-scale supplier diversity programs that they actively seek to do business with MBE certified organizations, right? So that quote-unquote badge gives you a whole new level of access that you don't have without it. Now, I understand why it's so laborious because, and by the way, to certify, you have to be at least 50% minority owned, right? So at Blue Rock, we actually have, we're very, very blessed from the standpoint of we have 2 Latinos and a woman, right? So we'd be a great 80s disco band, 2 Latinos and a tall white woman. But so we're 100% minority female owned. So, when you guys were talking about access to capital, I think it's also access to resources and understanding how some of these things can be leveraged in the marketplace. But I'm going off on a tangent. The trend from my perspective is all things services. And I think the key piece is, I think Efrain's business, you're seeing this right now, the biggest gap, right? We hear about things like the labor shortage. We hear about the great resignation. Personally, I think it is a misnomer. There is a huge population ready and willing to go to work. What we don't have is the connection that says, how do we tap into this community that's ready to do it? And the way to do that is actually through Latino-owned businesses and people who are connected. And that's why I'm so passionate about Centro, who are connected to that community to gain that access. And then last but not least, I think the other piece is for non-Latino businesses and non-Latino owned businesses, the other piece that I'm seeing is because for those organizations that are progressive enough and see the need, it's holy cow, we don't have any bilingual, bicultural leaders, right? So I want to be able to hire this community, but I have no way to communicate. I have no way to engage. And I have no way, because the other piece that we're experiencing is it's no longer just about talent acquisition. It's also about retention because the competition. I have one. I'll give you just one brief example. I have a retail client down in South Florida. They're paying anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500 sign-on bonuses to hire warehouse workers, right? Because they're competing with the Amazons of the world and others. But the issue is because that competition is so fierce, that employee's experience when they walk in the door better be a positive one. Otherwise, they'll just go down the street. And if you want to create that experience for a Latino, you better be able to engage with them in their mother tongue and understand what it means to be Hondureño, Boricua, Dominican, etc. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
No, thank you so much, Ruben. You said so many things that triggered things for me. And, working in this community, I think you pointed out something I want to bring to the forefront as well. In businesses that aren't Latino owned, the importance of Latino representation in leadership roles and in leadership positions. We get calls all the time with people, first of all, wanting us to help them hire employees, and they need to go to Efrain for that. Because Centro Hispano, what we do is we help people build understanding and relationships that take longer to build. It's more of a road, not a door. And so when we think, one of the first things we ask companies that are trying to hire Latinos is, do you have any Latinos currently? If you do, what voice do they have? What levels of influence do they have in the organization? And another really important question is, what do those people truly think of you, right? Is this a great place to work? Do they feel included? Do they feel like they're taken into account? Do they feel like they belong? Or is it a place they stamp a card in and out at the end of the day? So for another day, we can have a presentation on more strategies on engaging Latino employees, but definitely a really important question. And again, retention. Ruben spoke about it briefly, and the importance of, hiring people is sometimes the easier part. Keeping them is harder. So what strategies do we have as companies to retain our Latino employees, and why is it different from other people? What values are different? What priorities are different? So great questions. I think that this gives our chamber folks an idea of some other panels that might need to be organized. I want to address some questions I want to address some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat, because to me, part of this is being able to engage with our audience, and I'm really sorry I can't see you all. So I have a question from Abby that's really, I like practical solutions. I like practical questions. And she's asking, what are some tangible ways that fellow small businesses can create partnerships and reach through potential language barriers? What are some resources you recommend? So from our panel here, what are some of the, I guess, Abby, I would like to know a little more in your question in terms of, what type of partnerships are you talking about necessarily? But we're going to take a stab at this question in broad terms. So if I am a non-Latino owned small business and I do want to build relationships with with Latino businesses, what are some strategies I can do if I don't speak Spanish, right? So I'm going to let the team jump in here. Does anyone want to start out? Tell us, Ruben.
And this is going to be a shameless plug for Centro Hispano, right? And the way I look at that is, Claudia, one of the things that I've appreciated about coming to know you and the time that we've spent together, there is a Google-esque quality about what you guys do in terms of connecting people in the right places. So what I would say is, the quick one to that would be to leverage Claudia, Brandon, and others to say, what is this specific need? And even if Centro can't accommodate that, doesn't have the capacity, they know who to connect you with, right? So I see you guys as an excellent connector to what's the need, where in the community do we get that? And then I think actually some of the work that Centro is doing right now will make some of those resources available. Claudia, you and I have talked about some of the training facilitation and other pieces. So quick and dirty, call somebody at Centro and they'll connect you.
Thank you, Ruben. Efrain, what are some thoughts? I saw you earlier there and you're unmuted, so I'm putting you on the spot. I know you've been working in both communities, the Latino and the non-Latino community, for quite a long time. What are some of those bridges? What are some of those opportunities that you see that are very tangible?
Yeah, I wanted to tag along with Ruben on that about the right people in the right spots, right? When it comes to non-Latino organizations that we work with right now, it's getting them to the point where they can be more inclusive, getting them to a point where they can open themselves up to other cultures, like you're saying, or like what we're mentioning, to develop the materials, like, Ace mentioned as well, develop materials in other languages so that they can, have access to that other, very large group of people, where they can get, that, that fill that gap in the needs of the workforce or their labor, and not miss out on it because, they don't have the person that can communicate with them. So right. I focus a lot on having the conversations with the companies and letting them know that that's the way to go. Because, like I mentioned earlier, as we have people moving into this area, the first thing they need is a job, and they need to make sure that they have that secured, so that they can, later on move on to other things. And so I agree with Ruben, the retention part, where he's like, they come into a company, they want to feel welcome. If they're not welcome, they're not going to come back the next day. So, right. That is like you were saying, it's a very tangible thing because, you need to go to work every day so that you can have everything you need the next day. So if you're not getting that from the first place that you walk into, regardless of what it is, if it's the job or, a store or somewhere else, it's going to be tough,
Thank you so much.
Claudia, my apologies. I thought of another thing that just hit me as we're talking about this topic. I think another source to be very practical from Abby's perspective, we are in the Bible Belt, and the infrastructure we have from a church perspective in the Southeast, and Knoxville is no different. There are great resources and bilingual leaders in those organizations. So two that I know of, for instance, West Park Baptist, all volunteer. English is a second language, and a huge community, even non-Park West Baptist people who go there because they know that her name is Nereida, she goes by Nettie, is there. Park West Church of God, Melvin Colon, who comes from the hospital system, right? So, I think that is a quick one because most of it, if you look at kind of those institutions, that's another place to go for resourcing.
Thank you, Ruben. That's very, very true. Brandon and I experienced that when we want to get things out into the community further than our reach, we definitely partner with the local churches. Abby, I think one of the other really practical questions, and this is me as an extrovert, so I don't know if everyone does this, but I'm using an example that's very brief, but for example, if I own a construction company and I know I need a framing group or I know I need a plumbing group, I'm driving down the road, I see a Latino-owned business on the side of a car. I take the number, I call them up and say, hey, I have a business. I really want to. I want to know what possibilities to work with you. What do you believe in? What is your philosophy? Do our companies mesh? I think those are really practical ways, and building relationships just really does start with basic hellos, right? So I think that might be something. I do want to tell you that we are working at Centro Hispano on a small business directory for the Latino community owned businesses. It's going to take us a little while to have something that's vetted and ready for the greater community, but it is part of this small business project that Brandon works with. So there will be some resources there. I hope we helped you a little bit on a broader range of that. I have a question that I think Brandon or Ace can answer. And Doug is asking us, what key geographic areas do we see Latinos moving from? We talked a little bit, Ace talked a little bit about not all of the immigration is from people coming from other countries now. It's a lot of Latinos coming from other parts of the country to East Tennessee. And as a Latina who moved here 5 years ago, I moved here from Austin, Texas, and answering this question for me was, I wanted to move to a place where I could buy a home. I wanted a smaller community. I wanted less traffic. I wanted a lot of that. Some of those reasons, are not unique to the Latino community. We see it in other parts of the community as well. But in your research, Ace, but also in your experience, Brandon, as the workforce development director at Centro, and you all of your students, adults coming in to learn English, what are you all seeing? Go for it, Brandon.
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things that the community needs to be conscious of is, the Latino community and Latinidad is not a monolith. And so there's a very diverse and beautiful population that comes from many different countries, both with, outside of the United States, but then also within regionally where we are now in the United States, and like Claudia said, relocating. But I do think that geographically, we do see a lot more people coming from Centro and South America. And so it's less of a Mexican Guatemalan population, which was a larger chunk of the portion that we had there. So I think that's one of the things geographically that we see is just the difference, and that it's a very diversified Latino community that we're encountering here locally.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and yeah, like what he's saying is definitely true. And what's interesting from like a research perspective is in these new destinations, a lot of times what happens is you get these Like you said, the Latino community is diverse and they come from these different countries, right? And there's also different reasons why they migrate. So for example, a lot of my work and interviews that I've done is with the Venezuelan community who's been migrating due to political crises in their country, right? And so I would say here in Knoxville, from what I've seen, a lot of that is, yeah, there's definitely a strong community from Mexico, a strong and growing community from Venezuela. And like Brandon said, also, we have a Guatemalan community. It sounds like especially in the Loudoun County area. But yeah, the one thing I would say is that when it comes to migration, a lot of the time there's a pull factor where you're going to migrate to somewhere where you have connections, right? And that's how you get these pockets of groups who share a similar culture, such as those from Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia. And like Brandon said, what's great about the Latino community is this diversity. And when Ruben talked about being bicultural, I think that's a big part, like for me, especially as like someone who doesn't identify, who's not Latino. It's this idea that I have to do the work to understand the history of what's going on in these places. And I have to do the work to become and try to be bicultural, to make those connections. Kind of going back to what Abby said, a lot of that work, we as non-Latinos, we have to do the work to learn, try to communicate, to understand the history of these places. So I think that's an important part of connecting with these diverse communities we have here.
Thank you so much, Ace. That is an excellent segue into another question from Amy that can actually be answered by Brandon. So here in Knoxville, where can someone learn to speak Spanish or improve their Spanish or practice their Spanish? Tell us more, Brandon.
Yeah, at Centro Hispano. We have multiple opportunities and ways that you can get involved. We have a really robust English as a second language program where we do use Spanglish to communicate and teach in the classes. Thankfully, through a partnership with Pellissippi State Community College, we are doing those classes in person at the Division Street campus. But we do also offer Spanish conversation tables. We have a more formalized basic Spanish program that you can reach out to me and find out more information about upcoming dates that we're going to have that. But really, like, one of the biggest things, Ruben, you talked about this when you talk about making those connections, is learning that basic Spanish. Even whenever you say, hola, ¿cómo estás to someone, you are showing them that you are willing to learn more about their culture and you're inviting them into yours as well. So I think it's really important to take that first step. And if you really want to make that connection, learning even the basic Spanish to have a conversation with someone about how their day was, that can be a really crucial barrier breakdown.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brandon. I think I have another question here from someone. I don't have my education specialist on the panel today, but I think this is a really pertinent question around how are we supporting the Latino school population, preparing them as for the workforce. And I think if anyone would like to jump in, I have something to say about this as the panelist, as the moderator. I have something to say, but I do work very closely with the children in our school system. And I will tell you that about 7 years ago, 3% of Knox County schools was Latino. Today, we're over 11.2% of the school population, 11.2%. So I like asking people the question, are you ready for this workforce? You're talking about bilingual, bicultural people. How do they know that your company is a place that they want to go? How do they know that you are a place that's going to welcome them and give them the chance to learn? So one of the challenges that we do have in Knox County school system is truly representation from teachers and from administrators. So as a Latina myself, I consider myself young. I'm an old millennial, but I'll talk to young people in the school system who have never seen a CEO or an executive director that looks like them, that speaks their language, that represents them who they are. And they've also many times been in spaces where their heritage and their culture doesn't necessarily seem welcome. So how are we creating those spaces and those opportunities and those mentorship programs and those internships? So I come from Honduras and I talk about this often. There are like 5 different career paths for us. There are more, but in general, you're a teller at a bank, you're a doctor, you're an engineer, or you're in business. That's what you do. So you come to the States and there are all these different tracks, but in Honduras, my education was college, these are the paths, this is it. And here we have the TCATs, we have the 2-year programs, the certifications for 1 year. What does it look like to give our young people the opportunities to understand what other things are out there? I have a mentee who was interested in filmmaking. Her parents have 3rd-degree educations in her country. They didn't know how to help her. Quite frankly, I didn't know how to help her. Luckily, we have a network of people that support us. So I put out, some questions and said, who can help? So she had an internship this past summer with a film company in town. She had a mentor from the University School of Film. Just an amazing opportunity where else could she have had that experience, right? And it's just an incredible way that the community came together to support this young person. So how are we creating more of those opportunities to help our young people see that there are job possibilities in the community, that there are places that they are going to be welcomed for who they are as a whole person, with all the language and cultural background that they have and all that richness they have to offer to Knoxville. I went on my little tangent there. Is anyone on my panel interested in helping answer this question?
I jump in a little bit. Right. I can tell you from my perspective, when people walk in the door, I don't just send them to work too. It's important to have, that career coaching that, I think it's very important, like you were mentioning, there's people that are here that, their parents probably didn't have the opportunity to go to school. So they're probably not going to have that idea of like what all these things that they could do. So they come here and they're like, well, there's so many things that are available, but what is it really that I'm going to like? And a lot of the times this is developed by having the conversations with them and having that, career coaching with them and just really finding out what they like to do and, kind of like help them drive towards that. And not just, like I said, end up in a place where they're just going to go get a, paycheck, but not really be happy, So, I think like it's very important, and I remember, and I know that you guys are still doing it, thankfully, when the COVID starts slowing down a little bit more, it'd be, better. But like the networking that you were talking about, just having those conversations, helping connect with people, even if I don't need it for myself, maybe I run across somebody that needs something and we can help them, help be directed to the right person that can help them, or just kind of mentor them. I remember I went to, and this was a long time ago, when I went to one of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, networking events. That's how I actually got to know the people here at Express. That's how I actually got to know some people from Centro. And, I have a safety background. And so they were the ones that told me like, well, I recommend you go and start taking some training at the, it was a union laborers training facility that is like in the west side of Knoxville. But if it wasn't for somebody like that told me like, hey, I recommend you do these things, it wouldn't have been easy for me to actually do it, So again, access to information, but also kind of like some mentoring or coaching along the way.
Absolutely. I know we have some other questions, but we are at time, and there is so much more that can be talked about here. We can send questions that haven't been answered to our panelists, and we can help get that information back to all of you. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Time is precious, and you taking an hour out of your time to come and ask us questions and learn a little more about the Latino business landscape in East Tennessee means a lot to me personally as a Latina in the Hispanic Heritage Month. But also I want to thank my panelists for joining me today and the Chamber for helping to organize this event and for the sponsors that made this event possible. So thank you again. Please let the Chamber know if you're interested in more panels about the Latino population in the East Tennessee region. There are a lot of other things that we cannot get to address in an hour, but we are very, very grateful to have you all here. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Muchísimas gracias.